Mike, welcome to God's Voice Daily. You cried out for Jesus in 1977, had a supernatural rescue from despair, and began receiving spiritual direction through dreams and visions. So, Mike, tell me more.
Yeah, so it was 1977. I was in college in Michigan, and my roommate had an experience with Jesus, and then I saw what a difference it made in him. And then we sat there one night in the dorm room and prayed, and I just had this presence that engulfed me, and I've never had anything like that before. And I just knew that he was real at that point. And then about a year later, I had another experience in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the same type of thing. So I felt like there was something calling me to some kind of a work. And then I had a dream. A relative of mine came to me in a dream and just started telling me about his life and how the problems he was having. And I couldn't talk to this person this way in the physical world. I couldn't have that kind of a conversation. So I thought, isn't that strange that he would tell me this stuff in a dream? And then I went to the Bible. So in Acts 16:19, Paul gets this vision of a man says, come to Macedonia. I said, but this is very similar to what I had. And then I just started looking at dreams in the Bible. And it says, depending upon where you look at the references, there's 90 to 100 of those throughout the New and Old Testament. And what really got to me was that as we're approaching the Christmas season, is if you look at the first two chapters of Matthew, if Joseph and the wise men had not followed their dreams, Jesus would have been slaughtered and his entire mission would have been gone. And I thought to myself, if God doesn't change, he's the same all the time. Why would, if he used dreams to guide the most important event in human history, then they certainly have to be helpful for us today. And then as time went on, I just started working with dreams. And in fact, I even had a television show for a brief time in a small town in Martinsville, Virginia. People would call in, I would help them interpret their dreams. And it's interesting. In churches, I had 12 years of Catholic school, Catholic church. I was in the Methodist church for 30 years. I've been to other churches. And the churches will reference dreams in scripture, but no one really talks about it in depth, about how you get this everyday guidance. And my purpose is to tell people that, Jesus is with us, and oftentimes, many times, he will talk to us through dreams. We just have to understand it, because it's a picture language. So if you remember back in Genesis 4, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and this is the dream talking about the impending famine.
Right.
So there were 9 on the Nile. There were 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly and thin cows ate them up, the 7 attractive cows. So Joseph is called in to interpret this, and he figures this out. But one of the things that he says is that God is the interpreter of dreams. And what he meant was that when you're working with dreams, that you often have to have spiritual inspiration, because that's often what helps me to interpret them. So it's just, you have to believe that God speaks to you. And it's interesting. There used to be this show, one called Touched by an Angel, back in the late 90s. And Monica the angel said, why is it when you talk to God, you're praying, but when he talks to you, you're considered nuts, which is sort of a funny thing, but it's the way some people feel. I have found that as soon as people put energy into understanding their dreams, that they will get guidance. Recently, I just did a class at my church, and a woman got interested in this, and she started following her dreams, having a notebook by her side, and all of a sudden she started getting guidance. So this is extremely important in our history. The early church fathers believed in dreams. Constantine, when he stopped declaring war on the Christians and declared it to be the Roman religion, he had a dream of seeing a cross. Jesus showed him a cross, and then he had a vision of that. So that really was the hallmark of Christianity, not being persecuted as much as it was, and being accepted. So as I said earlier, I look at practical guidance people can get from dreams. And in my book, I put 4 different categories, and there's other categories as well. But one is dreams about the physical body. Other ones are dreams I call self-revealing, shining a light on your spiritual growth. Psychic perception, and the word psychic just means of the soul. So everybody's got a soul. So it's just sometimes God allows you to see the future. And then spiritual guidance, answers to prayer. You can ask God a question and he will give you an answer. So my wife has had problems with her knees. She had arthritic knees, and she would go to an orthopedic surgeon, and he was giving her injections before she was at the point where she had to have replacements. And one day she had the dream that she was with the surgeon, and they went out back of his office and started digging up sweet potatoes. So I thought that was an interesting dream, and I looked it up. Sweet potatoes reduce inflammation.
Wow.
So that's what God was showing her. So it was a very practical thing. Another friend of mine, Terry, she had a really bad diet, ate a lot of junk food, and she also was constantly fighting depression. And sometimes God uses a good sense of humor. She has a dream one night where she sees a movie marquee, and it's written across it, your depression may have something to do with your diet. So she was being shown that you need to just change your diet, and maybe you'll get better. Self-revealing dreams, sometimes people will have dreams of pregnancy. Women will have dreams, and a lot of times they wonder, oh my God, am I going to have a child? But what is a pregnancy? But it's a new birth, a baby, like a new part of your life. So a lot of times it means a new birth spiritually. I had a talkative woman one night. She was really doing well spiritually, and she had a dream that she was walking through this beautiful field and had gorgeous flowers on the side, and it was a representation of how she was growing spiritually. She was making a good move there. But I had a dream one night that was telling me I walk every morning, and I had this dream that I was walking, and a voice came to me and said, Mike, you have to stop with resentment because it's curbing your spiritual growth. And that's what you have to, with dreams, you have to be able to accept some criticism because you'll get it. And I was being shown, I wasn't enraged against a lot of people, but there were a couple of people in my life that I wasn't too pleased with, but I was being shown, you've got to let this go. Psychic perception dreams, so many inventions came through dreams, the theory of relativity, the sewing machine, insulin, the periodic table. Many of the rock bands, the Beatles, two of their songs, Yesterday and Let It Be, came through dreams. Johnny Cash, his last album, one of his songs came through dreams. And I know you're from Ukraine, and my daughter-in-law is from Ukraine as well. And I had a dream in 2016 that she came to my house and she was pregnant. And she and my son had not planned on having children. But in 2019, she delivered our first grandchild. And so that just shows, I was being shown that a child is coming your way. But I will tell you this dream that I had, psychic perception dream, that just changed my entire life. So in 1989, I was moving back to North Carolina, and I was going to buy a home north of Greensboro, where I live now, and I was getting ready to put a contract on the house. But I was uncertain about it. And I was at a hotel, not in a very spiritual place, but I just got on my knees and I said, God, I need to know whether to put this contract on the house. So the next day, that night, I had a dream that I was talking to my realtor, and I said, John, we need to move go to a northwest direction. And then he didn't follow me in the dream. Well, the next day I woke up and I knew I wasn't supposed to put the contract on the dream, and I started looking in the northwest of this town. It was actually up in a county north of Greensboro. To make a long story short, I bought a house there, and then 15 years later I started working for the town because I had a dream I was helping businesses in the downtown, which is what I do. And then 19 years later from that, I retired. So it's interesting. You could have a dream years before, but it gave me tremendous guidance because I would have never met the people I did or even really helped with my dream work if I hadn't ended up in that town.
Well, Mike, what's interesting? 10 years ago, I had a dream Jesus came to me in a dream and it told me to start this podcast 10 years later, pretty much. And he said he'll help me. And I held on to that dream for 10 years. And then finally, actually 9.5 years, finally, I kind of pulled the plug on that. But yeah, it all started from a dream.
Yeah. And look at how your life, I'm sure, has changed because of that. But
Completely.
you kept the faith with it. And that's, sometimes it isn't immediate, but if you just hold on to that guidance you're being given, it can have a dramatic change.
Well,
in
I
your
would
life.
argue to say that it started the moment that I had that dream, things started shifting, because it took 9 years for me to get to the maturity level that I needed to be to start something like this. And so there's certain things had to happen, but he was already putting things in my place, kind of like he took me through his own school to get me to where I needed to be. But I'm curious, can the enemy hijack the dreams and use it for evil?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that, as always, like before you go to bed, is to pray for God's protection, to pray that He's with you, because and not every dream is a message from God. Some dreams are just indigestion, but you should always, every time you go into prayer or meditation or before you go to sleep, is pray for God's protection. And I think that will help guide you into the right message being given to you. And the dreams that have a lot of light on them, if they're vivid, I mean, I'm sure that dream you had of Jesus was very vivid, that those are the ones you need to pay attention to. Some are just dark and murky, and sometimes it's just your mind going into weird places. But the ones that have a lot of light on them, they're vivid, and they evoke a response in you, those usually are typically the ones I recommend people to follow.
Well, and interesting, because a lot of, dreams have a lot of symbolisms as well. It's almost like you have to decode it. It's almost like dreams have its own language that it takes time to seek out. Why is it that way? Why can't it be like super clear? And I'm sure some dreams are very clear, but a lot of times it seems like you have to kind of dig deeper.
Yeah, and there are a lot of symbols. It's this picture language that the ancient Hebrews understood. I would just give you an example. I mean, the first thing you can do is look at the purpose of a symbol. So I'll give you an example. I've had people tell me, and I've had one or two of these dreams, that they went into their bathroom in their house, and this is not the most pleasant symbol, but there was excrement there. There was an excessive amount of it. So what is that telling you? What is a bathroom? A bathroom is a place for cleansing. Either you cleanse your physical body or you remove waste from your system. But if there's a backlog, that may mean that you've got some negative emotions that need to be cleared out. If you dream that your house doesn't have a roof on it, you're functioning without any spiritual protection.
Wow.
There was a young woman who told me about when she was in college, she was with these friends and she would be with them, and in the dream she'd eat with them in the kitchen, and then she would get sick. And she had this repeatedly, but after she left college, she never had that dream again. And what that was telling her, what is a kitchen? It's a place where we consume food,
Nourishment.
but it's also it's symbolic of your spiritual nourishment. What are you bringing in? And what that dream was telling her was that the influence of those people was not good on her life, and that's why she had to reject it, as shown through getting sick. So the best thing people can do is look at the purpose of the symbol, and then just like when I used to diagram sentences when I was in school, on the left side of a paper, put the symbols, and on the right side, what is the meaning? And over time, you will start to learn. It'll be a little bit easier to learn, what these symbols mean. And I've oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier in the call, that expect you'll have some spiritual help, because many times I've had dreams that were very puzzling to me, but I'll pray about it. And one day I was just walking like I do in the morning, and all of a sudden it came right into my mind exactly what the interpretation is. So the point is, if God gives you a dream, He wants you also to understand it. But it takes time and it takes effort. And sadly, like I say, most of the churches really don't get into this. I think we should have Sunday school classes for little kids to understand their dreams, because when my children were small, they would have dreams that were very interesting and guiding them on their life, just like I have them, like you have them. So it's important, and over time, you will start to understand your dreams a lot better.
It's interesting. You were talking about how you hit a wall throughout the day, right? For example, you're trying to learn, a lot of times this happened to me when I was coding during my coding days. I couldn't figure out the problem. Like, how do I fix this code? And then I'd go to sleep. And at night, I'd have like a dream, and solution came, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd try it, and sure enough, it works. Why is it like that? Is it because we get our brain out of the way and God just kind of drops those things into our brain? Before we get back to the episode, if you're enjoying this interview, can you take a second to subscribe? It really helps us reach more people with these powerful stories. Thank you in advance. Now let's get back to the interview.
Yeah, because as you well know, we're bombarded with stimuli all the time, now more than ever in human history. But when you're quiet, when you pray and meditate or go to sleep, your mind can all that excessive stimuli goes away. And I'll just give you an example. So, the DuPont Corporation, which is a large corporation, back in the 90s, they had their engineers go through dreams studies as problem solving. And there was a guy named Floyd Ragsdale in the Richmond, Virginia plant, and they had a machine that kept on spewing water out. And they couldn't figure out what was it. It was costing them $700 a minute when this machine was down. So one night, Floyd goes to sleep, and he has a dream that he sees springs and hoses. So he wakes up, writes down those symbols in his notebook. He wakes up the next day, and he can't figure out, what does this mean, springs and hoses? He goes to work, and it dawns on him. The hoses are collapsing, and that's what's causing this to spew water. They break down the machine, and there it is. So it's interesting when corporations want to use dreams for problem solving. There must be something to it. So yeah, those practical answers can come to you when you're asleep.
Well, you were talking about how you wrote things down. What about dream journals? Is it something we should all have?
Absolutely. I think everyone should have one. I have one in my bedside table, because often, when you wake up, especially if you have to wake up to use the bathroom, whatever, it's very easy for that knowledge to slip back into your subconscious. So as soon as you can, to write down the dream, and even if you just write it down there, you don't have to work with it, but maybe the next day start working with it. What I think it does is it shows intentionality. It's just like having a consistent prayer life. You're putting, like, there's nothing in this world that, very few things, I should say, not nothing, that come to you without any effort. But if you put effort into it, it's almost like you're going halfway with God, and you're saying, all right, I'm going to believe this is coming to me. And you put the effort forward, and over time, you can have some really life-changing events through your dreams. And again, I think it's part of his guidance to us that he knows, as a friend of mine said, it's a difficult thing to be a human being. And he understands that. But this is a way that he tries to help us out, because so many practical decisions, and I used to see this all the time with people with relationships being shown whether to marry somebody or not to marry them, jobs, whether to take a job or not job. There was a woman who was in this relationship, and she said, Mike, I'm not so sure about this guy, and I've had this dream recurring, and recurring dreams are the ones you really have to pay attention to as well. She'd have dreams of crumbs, just crumbs on a table. So what was she being shown? That relationship had no substance. It was like she was settling for the crumbs, and she was being shown not to do that. Or this woman who had a dream, she was with this guy, and she wanted to get married, but she kept on having reservations, and she had a dream that she was at the front of the church ready to walk down the aisle, and the altar kept on going further and further away, and it was showing her, don't do this. Don't walk down this aisle with this guy, because it's not the right one. Whereas another woman had a dream. She was with this fella, and they were very close, and she had a dream they were at their wedding, and they were blissfully happy. And to me, it was a confirmation that this was the right way to go.
Wow. It's interesting, because that was going to be my next question, recurring dreams. because a lot of people have the same recurring dreams. Is it, like you said, those are the dreams you need to pay close attention to, because you obviously not getting it if it keeps coming up?
Right. It a lot of times that you'll be given guidance and you have to work with that. And if you don't, then it's just going to keep coming back to you. A friend of mine had this recurring dream. She was in a relationship with her boss, which wasn't the best idea. And she kept on having this recurring dream that she was in a car. She was in the back seat. He was driving the car, and he was driving like a madman, and they ended up going over a cliff. So I said to Carolyn, let me explain what this dream is. First of all, what is a car? But a car is our way of going from one point to the next in our world. Not everybody, but most people use them. So in the dream, look at the symbology. He's driving her car, so he was controlling what was going on. And she was in the back seat, meaning she was taking a back seat to his will, which was not good. And he was driving crazy. Wow. And they ended up going off a cliff. And it was telling her, this is not going to lead to a good place. You need to take control of your own vehicle, take control of your own life. Don't you allow yourself to take a back seat to someone else. And that dream she kept on having because it was telling her, you need to make a change.
Interesting. And, a lot of times when I get a dream, I try to complicate it. Like, oh, it may mean this or that. But the more I listen to you, the more I realize that it's really, you got to think simple. Almost like you have to simplify it. It's not as complex as you might think.
So a friend of mine, she was very regimented in her thinking and was completely inflexible. So she has a dream one night that she's in a classroom and there's a pig's head on her desk. And she is just happy as a clam that it's there, but everyone else is repulsed by it. So she told me the dream, and I said, Bobby, sometimes there's a play on words. You're being pig-headed, and you don't have a problem with it at all, but everyone else around you is getting pretty upset about it. So it was a dream telling her, you got to stop your pig-headedness and get a little bit more flexible. So sometimes you'll have very basic dreams, and they're just conveying a really good message.
Well, we can't talk about dreams without talking about the scary dreams. What about those?
Well, as I said, I think sometimes they are just our mind working through things. So many times what's happening before we go to bed will affect our dreams. Because I'll talk to people and I'll say, what was going on in your life at the time? Because sometimes you'll get ones that are just, the subconscious is not very subtle. It pretty much lays it out there, what's going on. And sometimes things get dramatized in your dream. And it may just be a fleeting thought you had, or maybe some sense of fear you had that gets magnified. Or there's the dream that everyone has, the dream of insecurity, where, like mine was, I was getting ready to graduate college, but I forgot to take an English class. People have some version of that. And oftentimes that's when you're feeling insecure or vulnerable, and you'll have that kind of a dream. So you have to have a little bit of discernment about that before you can really dive into it and understand it. But again, I tell people to pray for God's protection and for His guidance before you go to sleep, and I think that helps you with this. But you will still have occasionally, if you're upset about something, you'll have dreams. But I have to tell you this one that shows you God has a real sense of humor. There was this fellow who had this dream that he was in a classroom and God was the teacher. So he's listening intently to God, and all of a sudden he hears the back door to the classroom open, and he's thinking to himself, who in the world would be late to God's class? I mean, you can imagine that. And he turns around and it's Jesus, and Jesus looks at him and winks. So he wakes up from the dream, and this guy was really intense, but he worked with the dream, and he realized he was just telling him, lighten up a little bit. Don't get so upset about things. And so Jesus has a sense of humor as well, but it was just telling him to go through life a little bit easier than what he was doing. So
interesting. As I'm thinking about dreams, I'm thinking about the dream. So I was a waiter in college and high school for many years. And to this day, sometimes I have a dream where I'm in the restaurant setting and somebody tells me, "Oh, your table has been sitting there. You know, the people at the table are sitting there for like 30 minutes. No one greeted them." Like it's like PTSD from the old days. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no one even asked for a drink or nothing." And I'm just rushing to get them greeted, take their drinks, bring them. But yeah, it's kind of like what you worry about eventually. It keeps showing up. And I remember having dreams after we moved to the United States. We moved to the United States in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning. We had mafia threats. One by one, we hired bodyguards to take us into the bus. And when something traumatic like that happens, like for months, maybe even years, I've had dreams where I thought I was back in Ukraine and we didn't make the bus. Those dreams are always scary. But there's this one dream. I got to share this dream. The more I think about them, I remember I was on a work trip far, far away somewhere, several states across. And my wife was at home and I had this dream that my kids were at the beach, that they were at this hotel, top floor, balcony. At that time, my kids were very young. Right now, my kids are 9 and 12. And I remember my youngest one in that dream fell off a balcony and I woke up just in fear. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I prayed, closed my eyes. My mom always said, if you saw a dream and you didn't like it, close your eyes and imagine the happy ending. So that's what I would always do. And so then I wake up in the morning and call my wife and she picks up the phone and she goes, Vladimir, you won't believe this. We're actually at the beach right now. And my father surprised us, and he brought us to this beach. We're at Myrtle Beach, I think that's where they went. And we're on this top floor. There's this balcony. And Mike, as you can imagine, fear was going through my mind. And something inside of me said, don't tell her that, don't say anything. I just said, hey, watch the kids, make sure they're good. And I closed my eyes and I picture my kids pulling into the driveway with my wife. And seeing is believing. And when I saw them pulling in, I had peace and I prayed and I blessed them and I forgot about it. And you know what? They came home. Everything's fine. But I sometimes wonder, what if I gave in to that and said, hey, you watch them. I had this dream. What if I told her that dream and put fear into her mind? And so I do wonder about those kinds of dreams. So when somebody sees something like that, I mean, I guess I reacted appropriately because nothing bad happened. But I do wonder, if you get a dream like that and you react the other way, can it affect the outcome?
Well, I think if I were if I had had that dream, I think that just touching base with your wife and if you just said, watch the kids, you never know. Their dreams sometimes exist in potential. Like there could have been a potential incident there where maybe your son climbed up on something, so you got that alert. I mean, many, many times people reported to me dreams where they're being shown not to go on a flight, not to go on a car trip. I think there was some kind of alert there. Now, your wife better than I do, so maybe that was the right thing just to not share that because she could have been a nervous wreck on it. But I think it could have been you were just concerned, but it also could have been you were perceiving some potential fear. I used to fly every week when I worked for a corporation, and I had a dream that I was on a flight and it was crashing. I knew it was going to crash. And I saw this wall and it opened up and there was my daughter's room when she was 5 years old. And I looked at her and I was looking around at all of her things and I realized I would never see her again. And I just woke up in anguish. So I left my corporate job, but I used to fly U.S. Airways. I used to fly a lot out of Charlotte, where you are. And 3 months after that dream, there were 2 U.S. Air plane crashes on flights that I took on a regular basis. Wow. So I don't know if I would have been on those, but I'll tell you that was one vivid dream and it was frightening to me. So sometimes we're shown potential danger, and it could have been something like that, but just your acknowledgement of it, unless, contacting your wife, that was probably a good idea.
Well, and I told her, I didn't tell her the dream, but I was very stern. I was like, make sure that the door is always, I went through all the protocols. So she I could tell that she was, and then when I came home, I told her the dream and she was like, wow, blown away by the whole thing. But
Yeah.
Another thing I want to talk to you about. You've been so generous with your time. Appreciate it. Hopefully you're not on a time crunch. But real
No.
quick, talk about dead people in a dream. What does that mean?
Well, I will tell you, when I did that television show in Martinsville, the most people called me about the most common type of dream was deceased loved ones. And I will tell you, they were not creepy. They were not stuff that made people upset. They were very comforting. Like, for example, my sister, when my father died, they were very close, and she was just distraught. And one night she had a dream where my father came into the bedroom and he woke her up and he said, "Nancy, everything's okay. It's all fine." And after that, she woke up and she had this sense of peace. I've had, there was a dream, this woman, this was fascinating. She had cared for her husband for years. He was an invalid, and then he died. And she was with some friends and they wanted to go to, there's a little town in Virginia called Hillsville, Virginia. They have a flea market every year. So she went to this flea market but, with them in Hillsville. But first she had this dream that she was in the car with her husband. Her husband was driving. This was back when they had middle seats. She was in the middle seat, and there was this vague man with a mustache in the passenger side. And they were in Hillsville, Virginia. So she goes with her friend a few weeks later to this flea market, and she can recognize landmarks that she saw in her dreams. That she thought that was very strange. A few months later, she meets a man from Hillsville, Virginia, who has a mustache, and they fall in love and get married.
Wow.
So the way she looked at that dream was almost like her husband was saying, "This is okay." He put his blessing on it. And again, these are dreams that provide comfort for people. They don't cause them any issues. And I've done a lot of work studying, nearing death awareness when people get ready to cross over. Listening to hospice nurses when they see what happens is oftentimes folks will see their relatives. Like the other side is not as far away as we think, that they come to them and help guide them home. Or near-death experiences that you deal with all the time where people see their relatives. So I think sometimes in our dreams, they will contact us and oftentimes they assume some kind of a guardian role for us because we're still on the earth dealing with what we have to deal with, and they're on the other side and they are somehow our advocates. So that just fascinated me, all these dreams I used to hear about. And they all helped people. They didn't cause them to have any kind of consternation afterwards.
Interesting. Yeah, because a lot of times people talk about deceased relatives showing up as like, oh, those are demons. What's your take on that?
Now, I don't really think. I think one of the problems is, especially the more fundamentalist churches, is you're right. There's always dark forces. I mean, there's always influences out there trying to wreak havoc on this planet. I believe that 100%. But I also believe that there are forces for good there. And if your parent was a loving, kind, giving parent, I mean, why would that come back represented as a demonic influence? And most of the time, these people, the majority of the time, they're having a comforting experience. Can Satan represent himself in ways that are nefarious? Absolutely. But I think it's like, the whole thing, by your fruit you shall know them. If you have a dream and this is something that brings you peace and harmony, I think that's something from a good, positive source.
Mike, it's interesting. Again, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. In my dream where I got to talk to Jesus, there was a giant ladybug to his waist. And when I looked at that ladybug, and there was so much peace radiating from that ladybug. And when I woke up from that dream, I almost discounted the whole thing because of that ladybug. I'm like, that's so weird. Why would there be a ladybug? But when I picked up my phone and started calling my father, who lives in Ohio, he does not speak English, so we speak in Russian to each other. Even though we're from Ukraine. Russian is my first language. Ukrainian is my second. And I spoke to him in Russian. I said, "Dad, there was this ladybug." And when I said ladybug, in Russian language, in Soviet Russia, they call ladybugs God's cows. Like they're called Bozhaya Korovka, which literal translation is God's cow. And
Huh.
when I said that, I was like, oh my gosh, God's cow, what does that mean? So I started searching the web, and there's all kinds of Christian references to the ladybug and Virgin Mary, this and that, poems written all over. And so I thought that was interesting. On the last day, I remember when I was working for Billy Graham at that time, I was a web developer for Billy Graham for a couple of years. And I was in the inside of the cafeteria. And if you've ever been to the BGA cafeteria, it's closed. There's, it's inside and it's closed out. And so I was like near and closer to the door, away from windows. They never open those windows there. And I was so nervous. I invited a bunch of people to have this last meal with me before I was going to walk away and start this new journey, new chapter. And I was so nervous and anxious. And one of the people, everyone at my table knew that I had this ladybug dream with Jesus. And this one lady was like, Vlad, look at your shoulder, left shoulder. I look at my left shoulder and there's a ladybug on my shoulder. And I had so much peace. And every important decision I had to make, it seems like there's a ladybug that keeps showing up. So after that dream, so that's kind of interesting that it all started from that dream.
Yeah. And then interesting that he would use a symbol that connected you to your father and your past in Russia and Ukraine, and then you had that same experience here in the United States. So oftentimes symbols will be very personal to the individual. I knew of this woman. She called me and said in her family, if people had dreams of muddy water, that signified that somebody was going to die.
Ooh.
So that was the symbol that they accepted, and that's what they got. So she had that several times before somebody passed on. But God will meet you where you are. He'll give you symbols that you can understand, or at least understand with some research as you did. But it's pretty fascinating that way.
Ah, man, I can talk to you all day. But you mentioned a book, and so I'd love to learn more about what made you write it. How can people get a hold of it? All that good stuff.
Yes. So it's called Dreams Guidance from Within, a Christian Perspective. And I wrote it several years ago. I self-published it, and then I republished it with a conventional publisher just about 2 years ago. I just felt like that all that I saw in the Bible and all that I dealt with over the years, because beyond that TV show, which only lasted a while, I was on the local Fox affiliate here. And I helped people in classes. I did classes at the community college, and I've done classes at my church. I just feel like it's a resource for us to be able to get God's guidance, to receive that. And it's just another example that he's not far away. It's a picture language we have to learn. And I've just seen so many times in my life, just like you did with the dream of Jesus telling you that this is the course you're going into, this new adventure. I've seen dreams that I've gotten that have given me just invaluable guidance. And if I would have had a completely different course of my life, and not certainly as good if I had not listened. And I think that that's out there for everybody. I'm nobody special. I don't have a degree. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a licensed counselor. So I tell people this way: if God can speak to me and help me with this, he can speak to anybody, because I have my own human issues, fears and worries and all that. So to me, it's something that people can learn from, and they can have a closer walk with God, realizing that he's trying to guide you even when you're asleep. So,
Mike, in the beginning, before we press record, I asked you if you were in broadcasting, because you just have that radio voice. And now I find out you did have a television show after all. But I'm curious, is it something you'd be interested in doing, like a live YouTube channel one of these days, where you take phone calls from people, kind of like what I'm doing, but with dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I that's one of these things, Vlad. I'm trying to look for my purpose in life. And the last thing, I've done a lot of things. I work for a corporation. I work for a municipality. I work for the state of North Carolina. I'd like to finish off my life doing something that's really valuable. So yeah, I would certainly like to consider.
Well, I tell you what, for everybody watching and listening, comments below, let me know if you. I would love to bring you back. I have a community. We can go live there, or if it's something you'd be up for, I can make it happen for you, where you can go live and people with dreams can come to you, and I'll be happy to host it. or you can host it. Anyway, how about this? We'll stay in touch. And
Okay.
this is so fascinating. This is very interesting to me because my family, we're big on dreams. My sister, she has that gifting where every time I have a dream, I always call her. And she's just like you, where I'm overthinking it. I'm like, looking at it from a totally different perspective. And she's just like, Vlad, it's so simple. Watch. Boom, 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 boom. Like, how did I not see that? Like, why am I complicating this whole thing? Like, it's much simpler than I thought. So, well, Mike, this was awesome. I really enjoyed this. We'll stay in touch, and I'd love to bring you back, go live, and take some phone calls from people. That would be awesome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. We'll stay in touch. God bless. Take care.
All right, you take care.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. If today's episode spoke to you, share with someone who needs to hear it. And if you had a supernatural encounter of your own, I'd love to hear it. Just go to godsvoicetoday.com/call to schedule your call. And I'll see you in the next episode. It should be coming up right here on the screen.